Good morning Year 4 and welcome to Monday's comprehension lesson. This lesson's for the children who've got the Year 3 booklet, and if you've got this booklet then I need you to turn to page 32. Now you'll notice that it's the final page in our workbooks for our learning, and we're going to do this over Monday and Tuesday, so you need to listen to this video very carefully to understand how we're going to split this learning over today and over tomorrow. Okay, before we start, let's do a quick SPAG warm-up. So SPAG is our spellings, punctuation and grammar. So I'm going to move on to my spellings first for us to just get our brains working, and you might need to really focus in on how I have written my sentence. So my question is, can you spot and correct the spelling mistake? So let's have a look at what my spelling mistake is. My sentence says, the bike had blue wheels. So we've got a bike, a bicycle, and it's got blue wheels. I've got some spelling mistakes in that sentence, and I want you to have a look and spot whether you can see my spelling mistakes. So the bike had blue. Now blue, the colour blue, is not written or spelt like this. This is the blue if you went and blue. It's not the colour blue. So what I'm going to do, as I would in your book with my pink pen, is I'm going to put SP, and that's because there's a spelling error, and I'm going to write the correct spelling above. So remember, oo has got the EW sound, and it's also got the UE as well. So we've got B, oo. Okay, so the bike had blue wheels. So we've got wheels. Okay, so it seems as though it's been spelt right, but there is a letter that is missing. Can you tell yourself in your head, or if there's somebody next to you, how do we spell wheels? So I'm going to put SP here again for my spelling error. And I've got W, and then there is another letter which goes before my double E. And hopefully we have noticed it's a H. Wheels. Okay, so I've done my two spelling errors. So the bike had blue wheels. Okay, so we've done our spelling starter for today. Let's move on now to our punctuation. So my question to you is, can you identify where the missing comma needs to go? And I'm going to read you my sentence. In the distance, I could hear the rumble of thunder. And I've got my full stop at the end. So I've got my capital letter at the beginning, I've got my full stop at the end, but I also need some more punctuation, so have a think. And I want you to listen to my voice. Where do I pause? Okay, let's start from the beginning. In the distance, I could hear the rumble of thunder. Did you notice where I had to pause? In the distance, I could hear, wait, there was my pause. So I've got what we call here is a fronted adverbial, and that is a phrase which is telling us where something is. We could also call these prepositions, and they tell us whereabouts something is, and it's telling me in the distance. And naturally, when I read it, I needed to pause. So let's get my pink pen again, and I'm going to put a P, because when we have the letter P, that means, oh, we've got a punctuation error. And I'm going to put my comma. Oh, that's definitely not a comma. I think the board's had a little bit of a wobble. So I'm going to put my comma there. So in the distance, comma. So I've got my prepositional, my fronted adverbial, where it says in the distance, and then it tells me the second part of the sentence. I could hear the rumble of thunder. Okay, so we've done our punctuation starter for today. And finally, we're going to move on to our grammar. So here is my question for our third section of our starter today. Can you identify the noun in this sentence? And I've put in brackets what we mean by noun. So the noun is the name of an object. Okay? Miss Chafe's dog has a red collar. What is the object in here? Now be very careful because I have put a little trick in this sentence, and I've done it on purpose because I want to know where the noun is, the object. Okay, Miss Chafe's dog has a red collar. Now some of you might have thought, well, it's going to be this, because Miss Chafe is a noun. It's the name of a person. But actually, if it's the name of a person or a place, it's not a noun anymore. It changes, doesn't it? And it changes to what we call a proper noun. It's the name of a person or a place. So I am a proper noun and so are you. But if we want to know what the noun is, an object, it's not going to be Miss Chafe. So let's get rid of that. But it's going to be collar, because the object is the collar. It's Bruno, my dog's collar, and the colour of it's red. So red is the adjective because it's describing, but collar is the noun, so we'll circle that. And then we have completed our warm-up spag starter for today. Okay, so well done everybody. Now I just want to draw your attention to the learning question, because this is where you need to really pay attention to the video, because I've got some really specific instructions for today's learning and tomorrow's learning. It's not going to be what's in your book, and you're not going to do all of it today. So today what you're going to do is create and write my own story. And you'll notice here that the title of the story is The Lonely Dragon. And also in your books, on page 32, you can see The Lonely Dragon. So we are still working from the book. But what I want us to do is to write the rest of our story. So we need to do a bit of planning. We need to figure out the sequence of our learning today. And then you're going to finish off the story with the blank page on here. Now, I've done a bit of a story map on my board, and I just want to get us thinking about the setting and the feelings and emotions that we've got, because the first part of the story has been already written for you. So first of all, let's have a look at our introduction, and I'll read this out. You can follow with your finger as I write. So by now you've had plenty of practice reading text and answering questions. Now it's time to write your own text. Think of some questions, then swap with a friend. Now I want to pause there. Don't do this side today, okay? That's not today's learning. You're going to write a story about a lonely dragon. So this is why we've got it written on the board. And you're going to think about how does it feel to be lonely and how the dragon might make some friends. We've made a start to the story, but what happens next is up to you. Okay, so I'm going to read the story that we've got at the beginning on our page, and you can follow this with the story map that I've put to help you visualise the beginning of the story. So I'm going to move out of the way whilst I read it, and you can have a look at those pictures. Joel was walking home from school one day when he heard a strange snuffling sound coming from behind some trees. He went to investigate and was astonished to find a small orange dragon with tears streaming down its face. "Why are you crying?" asked Joel. Okay, and that's when the story stops there. Why are you crying? Now it's up to you to finish the rest of this story. And the story map that I've done on here is that we've got Joel, and he was walking, he was on his way from school, and he heard a snuffling sound, so it was like somebody was crying from behind the trees. And he was astonished. So when you say, oh, he was astonished, he was really surprised to see an orange dragon, but he had tears coming down from his face, so he felt very sad. And what Joel has done is he's asked, "Why are you crying?" Now, there is no answer for that yet because you need to think about your story. Now, before we even begin to put pen to paper and to write our story, we need to think of a plan. And that is where it brings me to our next part of the lesson. When we look at stories, you've got to break it down into small steps. You need to have your build-up, Okay, now the build-up really has already been done for you. So we've got the build-up. So I'm just going to tick this because we've got that bit. Next, in a story, there needs to be a problem. Something's gone wrong, so you need to think about what's gone wrong now with the dragon. And then, after the problem, we have what's called a resolution, where it all gets made okay, or it gets dealt with. Something happens to try and solve that problem, and we call that the resolution. And at the very end of the story, I'll come out so you can see, we've got the closing part of our story. So it maybe gives us a reason why the story came about and why the resolution worked, or it could be that they lived happily ever after. So I want to think about the problem, the resolution, and the closing statement. Now we know that Joel was walking home from school. We know that he's really been astonished to find this orange dragon. He was crying, he had tears rolling down his face. We need to think about what is the dragon's problem. So I'm going to have a look and have a think about my problem. So I'm going to just make little notes, and you can do this on some scrap piece of paper at home. It doesn't need to be in your books, but you need to jot down the 3 sections, or else you're going to get confused and you might go off. Quite often we do this at school, where we go off a little bit and then the story lasts forever and ever and ever and ever and ever and ever, and we don't actually get to the resolution or the closing statement. So we need to chunk problem, resolution, closing statement. So my problem, or let's say the dragon's problem, I'm going to name the dragon, I'm going to name him after my dog, so he's going to be called Bruno. Bruno the dragon. Bruno the could not find his way to, last line, school. So I'm going to put that Bruno the dragon is lost. He can't find his way to school, to dragon school, and he's got lost. He's took the wrong turning, and he's behind some trees, and he just can't figure out where to go to get to school. So what we're going to do is think about the resolution. What does Joel do? Okay, so Joel helps Bruno to find his magical, I'm going to have to squeeze over there, magical school. Let's just go back, I forgot my H. Let's think of a magical school. Where would a dragon go to school? Well, he's in a forest, so maybe he needs to find the school in a tree. So it's a magical tree. Let's call it the happy tree. Okay, so the problem is that that Bruno the dragon could not find his way to school. Joel helps Bruno to find the magical school, the happy tree. And the closing statement, what happens then? So we can put that Bruno arrives at school. Done it again. And Joel meets all of his friends. So I bet he wasn't thinking he was going to come back from school today. Oh, and meet a bunch of dragons. Okay, so that is going to be my story. Your story might be completely different, but that was my story. So I've done a little bit of a plan. So I've got a problem. Bruno the dragon could not find his way to school. The resolution, Joel helps Bruno to find the magical school in the happy tree. So it might be in a really enchanted forest that they need to go and find this special tree. So there's something special about this tree. And then what happens is Bruno arrives at school, so the problem is resolved, and then Joel gets to meet all of Bruno's dragon friends. So I've done a bit of a plan. It hasn't taken me long, and I've just made a few notes so I know where I'm going with my story, or else we can often go off a little bit and it ends up being a never-ending story. Okay, before I move on to the visualiser and start writing up this story, I want you to have a look at my 3 stars here. And this is what we call in school our success criteria. And its success criteria tells me what I need to include in my story to make it better. So we've got an expanded noun phrase. An expanded noun phrase is a phrase made up of 2 adjectives and a noun. Okay, so we could put the large orange dragon. Large, orange are my adjectives, dragon is the noun. So it's 2 adjectives and a noun, and you can tell your parents what punctuation you need to put in between them 2 adjectives, and you should notice that it is a comma. So we need to see some expanded noun phrases in your work. I want to see capital letters and full stops because I think some of us are slipping a little bit with that. We need to remember when we start a new sentence, it definitely always needs a capital letter. And also, if we are talking about Joel or the name of your dragon doesn't have to be called Bruno, but you can see that I've put a capital letter for Bruno as well. And full stops. We don't want to see a story where it says and, because then when you're reading it out loud, you can't breathe. So you need to have some punctuation to stop, and then you can start your sentence again. And finally, we've got some conjunctions in there, so you could use because as your conjunction or even though, and you can Google some conjunctions as well, and it'll come up with some ideas that you can use. Okay, so what I'm going to do now is I'm going to move over to the visualiser and I'm going to start writing my story out. I'm then going to pause it, I'm going to write the rest of it out so you're not just watching me write, and then we'll come back to my story ready for you to go on your own work. Okay. So it'd be really useful if you had your plan written out, ready. So I'm going to go under the visualiser and I'm going to complete my story. So why are you crying? Asked Joel. I'm going to use my inverted commas because it's speech. I've forgotten my way to school. Full stop. Close your inverted commas because Bruno stopped talking. And I'm going to put cried Bruno. Capital letter for Bruno. Full stop. Then I'm going to put Joel. Then helped Bruno to find his school. Full stop. So I just want you to have a look at my handwriting before we go on to anything else. So you can see that my letters are all sitting on the line. I've got no floaty letters. When somebody started speaking, I've got my inverted commas. So when somebody starts speaking, we use that. Whatever they've said, so I've forgotten my way to school, punctuation, close your inverted commas, okay? Because the dragon isn't saying cried Bruno. He's just saying I've forgotten my way to school, and then we close with our inverted commas here. Said, cried Bruno. Joel, so I've got a full stop, capital letter, Joel helped Bruno to find his school. Full stop. So there you can see I've got 2 good sentences to begin. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to write the rest of my story. Okay, I'm going to pause the video now and we're going to come back and read what I have written, okay? Okay, so I've finished my story now. That probably took me about 40 minutes, okay? So it's took me quite a long time, and I have actually needed to go on to another page, only slightly. But don't feel like you need to stop your writing if you're in a really good flow, just because you're at the bottom of the page. You can always continue onto any other spare paper that you've got, but just try and make sure that it is lined so that your handwriting is neat. Okay then, so hopefully you are wondering what happened in my story, so I'm going to start from the very beginning. I'm going to read you my story of the Lonely Dragon. Okay. "I've forgotten my way to school," cried Bruno. Joel then helped Bruno to find his school. They set off, and the Orange Dragon said his school was in the Happy Tree. After a while, they walked into a fresh green meadow full of vibrant colours. Glimmers of golden fairy dust swirled around Joel's head. This was no normal meadow. It was enchanted. "Look!" shouted Bruno. "There's the Happy Tree!" Standing tall was an emerald green tree. "The tree is very happy to see me," said Bruno. The branches were moving up and down. It looked as though the tree was waving at them. Suddenly, a forceful wind knocked Joel over, and before him landed the biggest dragon he had ever seen. His scales shimmered multicoloured, and his eyes were piercing blue. It was like gazing into the universe. "Late again," bellowed the dragon. "I'm sorry, Mr. Scales. I was lost. I couldn't find my way, but Joel helped me." "Oh, please let him in the Happy Tree. Please, Mr. Scales," asked Bruno. Mr. Scales scanned Joel from head to toe, sniffing at his hair. "Very well. I can smell that he has a good heart." They both went inside, and all of Bruno's friends were so happy to see him, and he was no longer a lonely dragon. To repay Joel for his kindness, Bruno and his friends took to the skies, and Joel was on his scaly back to ride through the moonlit sky. Okay, and that's the end of my story. So it's quite nice to be kind, isn't it? And it's nice to be kind to someone even when we might not know them that well. So there was a really good story, and the moral of the story was to help people. So you can see that that's my story. When you have finished your story, I do want you to just go back. Oh, no. Have you followed your plan? So we did a little plan, didn't we? So I have followed my plan. And have you also hit your success criteria? So did I use capital letters? Yes, I did. Did I use expanded noun phrase? So I'm going to have a look in my story. So let's put the visualizer on so you can see. Okay, so I need 2 adjectives and a noun. So I can see some there. So I've put beautiful, vibrant colours. So I've got a expanded noun phrase there. I've used capital letters and full stops. Even when it came to talk about Mr. Scales, he had a capital M for Mr. and a capital S for Scales. So just reflect on your writing, and if you want to highlight it, you can do. Now when you come on to this part, where there is lots of blank, let's get it right. So here, this is not for today. I don't want us to do anything on here. Today is just about writing the story. And like I say, I did need just a little bit of extra paper. If you need to do as well, then that's fine. But I look forward to reading all of your stories, and remember to plan and just enjoy it. So well done everybody, and I hope you really enjoy writing your story about the Lonely Dragon.